right, so hopefully I'm looking into the camera this time. Sorry again. Andy, can you turn it down just a little bit, sweetheart? Thank you. Just turn it down a notch, okay, hon? Love you. All right, so this one I'm calling funny animal stories. Just because these are all true. I was involved in all of them, so they're not so far-fetched anyway, but they're just kind of funny to me. So I'm looking down at my paper to make sure I don't forget anything. So the first one, when I was about, oh man, I want to say about nine, 9 years old or so, my dad, Stuart, he used to like to take us up. We'd go up to the woods or whatever. And sometimes we do camping. I wasn't big on camping. I like to shave and shower every day. So you're not getting any stink under here. That's just raunchy. So I have to have my shower, my shave, and everything like that. So I'm really a bad camper. I'm just grumpy and just the whole time. So anyway, sorry, I digress. But so one of the times we went up on a road trip to a place called Strawberry. It's a town or, way up Northern California. It's up in the woods. Haven't been there in years, so I don't know if it's still the same, but it was pretty isolated and again, way up north. So we were up there and, we used to like to go hiking. I loved it as a kid too. I'd have my inhaler and we'd go do our hiking. Well, my mom and my sister, Colette, was 4 years younger than me. So sorry, I'm talking fast. I'll try and slow it down. My mom and my sister, they stayed near the car. Dad and I went up the creek to explore, and hang out and talk and visit and do stuff. And so as we're going up there, we're walking, we're a good 10 minutes away from my mom and my sister. And next thing I know, my dad's yelling that there's a bear, and he says from his explanation of it, he just sees this bear come out of the water and all this water dripping off of its face and its fur, and it looks dead at us. So I get just a glimpse of this bear. It's a black bear. And so he turns around and runs, and he's yelling, run, run, and I'm well back from him. So I just turn around and start running. He's behind me. And like a fool, I didn't know I'm running uphill. And he's telling me, downhill, downhill. And I run into this thicket and I get caught in these branches. So I'm freaked out because I'm a little kid. There's a bear chasing us, going to eat us in my head. And I'm stuck in these brambles, like in this big old bush and thicket. And so he's screaming, break free. So I managed to break out of there, get all cut up and chewed up there. And I'm running. So he catches up with me, grabs me, puts me on his shoulder, and he's hooking it back towards where my sister and my mom are. And he's screaming, run, there's a bear, run, there's a bear. And so they hear this, and he manages to get us over this like hill with this really soft dirt, And so my sister and I are running back towards the car, and my poor mom is trying to get up, and the dirt just keeps crumbling underneath her. So she later tells it like it's a horror movie, like you're trying to escape some serial killer in the woods, and all of this stuff has happened. She finally is able to make it up, and we get out of there. Well, later on, we're in the car, and not too much later, but we see this, we hear these gunshots. Apparently, they were, these guys hunting, and this is what provoked the bear. And we see this bear across the street right in front of us, going further up the mountain, and it's got two cubs with her. So it was a mama bear protecting her cubs. But at the same time, it was pretty scary. I got to tell you, it was real scary. So now the other funny thing, it was years later. I'm in Bible college, 1997. I remember that year quite vividly. And my sister, is going to the same Bible college. She was at the same apartment complex, and we were in, my roommates, my cousin, it was one of my roommates, but my roommates and I were in one building. She was in the building next to us, but it was a good, 100 or so, 150 yards away. And she would keep telling me about this giant rat that was chasing her into her house and clawing at her door and hissing at her. I told her, we don't have any giant rats here. They're, just rats. I said, maybe it was a possum or something, don't know. But, to her mind, my sister keeps telling me I'm being chased by this rat. And I'm like, look, kid, you're 18. You just graduated high school. We grew up together. That there's no, giant mutated rats. It's, something. But so I just stopped believing her. I figured she just wanted attention. She's just, acting out or whatever. So one night I get a call on those, those old mobile phones that are, those bricks, and you pull out the, the metal wire for the antenna. And, she's sitting there talking to me. Fortunately, this had a long wire on it. So I stepped around our apartment complex, and I'm looking at it. It's about 11 o'clock at night on a Friday. And Yeah, I'm like, what's going on? And she puts the phone apparently to her door, and I hear this scratching, this scratching on her door and this hissing. She's got it under there, so I can hear this, and all of this scratching going on. And I'm like, what the hell is that? So, I put the phone in my pocket and I jam over there, and I climb up, those old concrete steps with the wrought iron, and it's got the iron, the black wrought iron railing, those old apartment complexes. So I'm up there, and I go and I look, and sure enough, there's this possum scratching at her door. Apparently, she had the stalker possum that just kept going after her and chasing her up there. And I didn't believe this kid, my poor sister at the time, that I thought she was full of it. So anyway, there's this possum, and of course, what's it do? It turns, it hisses, and it charges me. Now, all the PETA and the animal conservationist people, look, I get it, I understand. I was also 22 years old, but I did the only thing that I knew to do, and I punted that damn thing over the railing. I drew back with my right foot, and I kicked it as hard as I could because I wasn't about to get bit, for damn sure. So I kicked this thing over the railing, and it landed in the volleyball pit that was in the back of my sister's apartment. And I'm sorry, it still makes me laugh to this day that she's thinking it's a giant rat, and all it is a possum. And that it was so fixated, apparently, that it would see her and chase her. So I don't know if it was like one of those monkeys, like the capuchins, when you've got food and it just knows who you are, and that you've got the good food. But it was a funny story. And, a lot of people didn't believe it, but yeah, I kicked that thing. I didn't feel bad about it. I still don't, because who knows? I know they don't all carry rabies. I know that, hey, nature's nature, and they're, we're intrude on their territory. But still, I'm damn sure not going to get bit. So that thing went flying. It lived. It turned around, hissed at me, and scampered off. But not until it hit that volleyball court. And the dirt just, you had to be there to actually appreciate it. And I'm not reveling in the animal's misery, but it was the last time it bothered her. And at least it wasn't killed. We didn't hurt it. So we had a raccoon there, too. We had like a resident raccoon that lived in our dumpsters. And this is at South Coast Racket Club, which is off of Sunflower and Bristol Street there. They used to call it South Coast Metro. Maybe they still do. It's kind of catty corner. It was right off of Bristol Street, catty corner to the South Coast Plaza, not a mall, a shopping resort. So anyway, we had this resident raccoon there. And this thing, every time I go to take the trash out, it seemed it would pop out, and the thing would be in my face. So I got used to carrying a bunch of coins, pennies, nickels, quarters in my pocket. And anytime I lift up to throw the trash in, before I did anything else, I'd have like a quarter or something in this hand, ready to snap it at that thing. And lo and behold, one time, popped back up. I opened the lid. First, I set the trash down. I opened the lid, and this damn thing pops up like a jack in the box, and looks at me, and I just smacked it with a quarter right in the snout, and it dropped down, and the lid dropped down on top of it. I heard some rustling around in there, so I knew it was still there, and really pissed off at me. So I went to the next dumpster this time, and I did that one. So anyway, another little funny animal story. I know, and I'm sorry if you guys are like strong PETA people and you hate everybody that's mean to animals, but I do things in the least painful way I can to not get bit and not get rabies. Been chased by a skunk once before. That one I deferred to the skunk because I wasn't about to get sprayed, and I ran like hell the other direction. But so I think the last funny one about my dog I used to have, Brom. Love that dog. Named him Brom after Brom Bones. Actually, here's something not everybody knows, but I used to call him. His middle name was Socrates, but we used to call him Socrates Johnson after Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, how they would call Socrates Socrates Johnson when they introduced him to the crowd. So I just thought it was a funny thing. Anyway, so Brom, named again after Brom Bones because he was an American Bulldog, a big guy, 120 pounds, 25-inch neck, 25-inch head, big dude. So one time I'm sitting at the computer and I hear a line from Full Metal Jacket, and it was one of the pretty raunchy lines in there. And I'm like, what's going on in there? So I go over there, and here's my dog sitting right in front of the TV, just watching the screen. And I'm like, dogs don't do that. That's weird, dude. What are you doing? So I shoo him out of the way. Actually basically have to muscle him out of the way because he's a big guy, and he found his seat, you know. And as soon as I left, he got right back in front of that thing again. So I thought, this is weird, and I'm going to do kind of a weird experiment, you know. So I ended up, it was on demand, so I play it, you know, every so often. And every time I turn that thing on, and he'd hear Arlie Ermey's Gunnery Sergeant sitting there, sound off like you got a pair. He'd go right in front of the TV, and he'd sit down, and he'd watch that entire movie. I kid you not, he would watch that entire movie. And so, you know, Maria's at work at this point. I was working at home, making money doing that. And so I start recording him, and I start taking pictures of this dog. And I've got photos on my Facebook in my photo albums of this dog sitting on his rear end with his legs right out in front of him, splayed out, you know, watching Full Metal Jacket. And anytime you'd get between the dog and the TV, he'd nudge you out of the way, and he'd sit back down. And I'm kidding not, every time I'd leave the house, I'd put that video on for him on a loop because he would sit and watch it. I bought him the DVD, and I know it's a horrible war movie with a lot of cutscene and a lot of killing, but it would keep that dog entertained for hours. So sometimes I'd sit there and I'd say, sound off like you got a pair, Brom, and he'd bark. He'd start barking. That's hilarious. Well, anyway, it's funny to me as a guy. I found it just hilarious that this dog, like, he would have made a perfect Marine dog, I swear. But anyway, he lived until he was 12, and he unfortunately passed away. You know, Audrey and I buried him and stuff. But wonderful dog, wonderful dog. I'd love to get another one like him. But yeah, I've never heard of a dog. Full Metal Jacket. That dog used to eat the hot shrimp. I'd go to the Chinese restaurants and stuff like that and buy the hot shrimp with the red peppers in there. You know, the little red, long, dried peppers. And I throw them to him, and he and I'd eat them, and we'd sit and we'd crack hazelnuts and eat them together. The weirdest thing. Loved oatmeal. I'd give him some oatmeal with some liquid creamer, coffee creamer. He liked the French vanilla. And so he would do that every so often too. But just a wonderful companion and an awesome dog. But yeah, those are some of the funny stories. My sister's dog too, Rocky, he was a little Boston Terrier. He used to love me, but at the same time, circumstances one time had my dad and mom and my sister, my brother-in-law, my wife and I, my grandma, we all lived in the same house. We figured we'd split the rent, you know. And before Maria and I ended up moving out, you know, we were there for a little while together. And that dog, I'd get up and I'd open the bedroom door to get into the shower. And from the bathroom door to our door, it was 6 feet. 6 feet, that's it. But before I could get into that bathroom and shut the door, that damn dog, wherever he was at, whether it was out in the backyard and the door was open, whether he was in a different bedroom or the living room, he would run in, bite me in the rear end, and then run off before I could turn and take a swing at him. And I know it sounds horrible because it sounds like I'm abusing these poor animals. And I'm not. I mean, I love that dog too. You know, God rest that poor guy's soul. He was a good dog for the most part. But that grouchy SOB every morning. And I got to the point where I would look out, and I'm looking left and right. I'm like in fear of this dog. And I'm a big guy, right? I'm like 220 pounds. And this little 25-pound Boston Terrier, man, he'd get me on the rear end every morning. And I would be so mad. I'd be yelling at my sister, Colette, it's your damn dog before I kill him. Of course I wouldn't have done it. But this dog was cracking me up. Oh, cat stories. Mr. Wigglesworth. Mr. Wigglesworth, our cat. Maria and I got Mr. Wigglesworth in 1998. My supervisor at the time, I worked at a place called Car Temps, which is a rental car agency. And my supervisor had gotten a cat from the, in Modesto at the, what was it? We call it the Pound, but the animal center. And so, but she couldn't take this cat home, and I saw him, beautiful tabby, with the swirls, I think they call him a tortoiseshell or whatever, and beautiful eyes, just these golden eyes, wonderful little cat. So I was allergic to cats, but I'm like, maybe I'll keep him indoors, maybe it'll work out. So Mr. Wigglesworth came home to live with us. Named him Mr. Wigglesworth after an old Pentecostal preacher, Smith Wigglesworth. I named animals and people, like my daughter Indiana, after some odd things. So Mr. Wigglesworth, he was like our baby. Marie and I didn't have any kids at the time. We spoiled this cat, put him on a health plan at PetSmart, made sure, he'd go in there. They knew him. He went with us everywhere, but he never went like outside on the ground. He got out once, felt the grass and freaked out and ran back inside. He was always an inside cat. But sorry about the squeaky chair here. So Mr. Wigglesworth, when we first got him, Maria worked at the DoubleTree in Modesto. She worked graveyard shift. So she'd come home and she'd be super tired. I'd be getting ready to go to work. And she'd be there with her food that she got from the cafe or whatever at work. And you know, her 7-Up would be there in a cup. And the cat would come by and be drinking her soda. Poor Maria's so tired, she'd look over. By the time she's getting the cat, he's like swiping the little sausages off her plate or something. You know, and he'd swipe it and take off. And then he'd keep her up all morning because he'd find a paper bag, like a grocery bag to play in, and run around the kitchen in the bag. So as this cat got older, he was a big cat, you know, we used to call him German Meow, amongst other things, and, you know, Fat Kitty, because he was just a chubby thing. And Maria would make him like do crunches and sit-ups, and we put costumes on him for Halloween. So, but he was hilarious, you know, and if I had ice cream, he'd come in and he'd grab a scoop with his paw and run off, and I'd have to throw the bowl out. But he used to get really cross at me and get really salty when I'd come home from work. He'd be mad, you know, because he'd go with me on car rides. He'd sleep like under my neck or around my head. And so there were a few times when I'd get home and he'd walk right next to me. He's like he's complaining, you know, and I'd be like, get out of here. And he'd walk with me down the hallway into the bathroom, and I'd shut him out at the bathroom door. And while I'm in the bathroom, you could hear him out there, like he's complaining that I left him for the day and he's bored. This cat had his own room. Well, it was our office, but he had his own bedroom. He had one of those, I can't remember what they're called, the automatic litter things. I mean, he had all of it, you know, the fresh water flowing and everything like that. And so he had it made, and he was an interesting character. So he was lonely. So Maria and I actually, this was my crazy idea again. You know, we decided, let's get a house rabbit. You know, I had rabbits before growing up, you know, you could train them to do stuff. And so we decided, you know, let's get a house rabbit. Well, I decided, so to drag Maria along for the ride to East LA to a shelter from Modesto to East LA. It was about 300 miles because I saw this rabbit, and I'm like, hey, we'll get this one and be a perfect companion for him. Well, there was a bonded pair there, so we took them both, you know, and he loved snuggling up the one rabbit, but the other one used to freak him out. So anyway, we love this cat so much, we got him some buddies while we were away at work, so he wouldn't be lonely. So Mr. Wigglesworth, he lived about 10 years, I think, and he died, passed away. He got kidney issues. I can't remember what it was, but, you know, the liquid builds up and whatnot, and you can't process. But he was a funny cat. I mean, really neat. The only real cat that I've ever owned, you know, as a person. And again, we had him for 10 years. He was like our baby, you know, he's our kid. And there were some funny stories where, like, I remember he kept coming up on the bed one time, and I was so tired that I just kicked my foot up, and the cat flew across the room, landed on his feet, but turned around and gave me the meow, 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 and then took off. So later on, you know, we were living in Santa Ana in Orange County. And so we had gotten Brom, my bulldog that I talked about earlier, American Bulldog. And he was a puppy. And, you know, dogs sometimes are a little bit predisposed to digging in cat litter. Really gross, but that's something that they do. So, you know, he's a few months old, and he weighed probably a good 20 pounds or so at this point, about the same size as the cat. And, you know, all I know is in the middle of the night, and it's a wood laminate floor, you know, we're on the middle of the night, I'm awakened by this yelping of this dog like he's being killed. And, you know, I jump up, turn on the light real quick. I'm like, what's going on? I slip on the floor, smack face down on the floor. And this American Bulldog, and he's 20 pounds, but he's got this hard head, comes sliding towards me, smacks me right in the head. So we collide, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? It's the middle of the night. I'm exhausted. I'm grumpy as hell. Ray's like, what's going on? What's going on? And next thing you know, here comes the cat. You know, the dog's got a scratch on his face, and the cat just comes kind of sauntering in with his tail up in the air. And apparently the dog tried to get to his litter box, and the cat was having none of it. So those are some of the stories about Mr. Wigglesworth. Also, when the ones earlier about that dog, Rocky, how Rocky and Mr. Wigglesworth had this love-hate relationship. They would never mess with each other. We're in the same room. But when Mr. Wigglesworth was in our bedroom and Rocky was out in the hallway, Rocky would slam his face. This is this little Boston Terrier. He'd slam his face to try to get his nose under the door and like sort of bite at the cat, more playing than anything. And you'd see the cat just smack him underneath the door. And the dog would cry and run. So this would happen a couple times. And after a while, Rocky would just hang back and we'd be on the living room just laughing because then you'd see the cat's paw come out, sort of like a periscope, but underneath the door. And he's like sliding it back and forth, looking for this dog so he can smack the hell out of him. So it was really funny. And that dog would get tagged, and every time he would get tagged, he'd yelp and run off. I mean, he'd scream bloody murder, and he'd take off, and this cat would just sit there and, you know, just put his tail up in the air and saunter off. Really funny stuff. I mean, I'm sure a lot of them do that, but our experience, it was really hilarious. But they also seemed lonely. So when we moved, you know, that's when I got the rabbits because the cat was super lonely. You know, and the rabbits actually lived, Audrey was born, and the rabbits lived a few years too. So she got to see them and experience that. It was fun for her. They'd get out sometimes, and Brom, my American Bulldog, you know, he's a big guy. He never tried to hurt him. He'd kind of corral them and put them back in their little pen or their area. That was pretty cute. Yeah, Wigglesworth was a funny cat. My mom used to call him Smith, even though we tell her that's not his name. But yeah, so he got his name from a old Pentecostal preacher. He punched people in the stomach and whatnot. I like some of these eclectic characters. Sorry. And so, trying to think of other ones. Mr. Wigglesworth. When he was at, I think it was Banfield. It was like the PetSmart version of their wellness center or whatever. And we get a call, you know, saying he's done with us. You need to come pick him up. And we're like, all right, what's going on? So we get there, you know, we go to sign him out, and we hear all this banging in the back. We hear, you know, metal trays crashing on the ground. Stuff sounds like it's flying against the wall. People are screaming. You're hearing, you know, screams of, ow, and what the hell, and he just bit me. And, you know, so turns out it was our cat. We didn't realize it, but he was really upset. And so apparently they'd given him a shot, and he was done with them. So after the shot, I guess he just was raising Cain in there. Excuse me, still have the cough. So he's in there, and he is just, again, raising all sorts of issues, knocking things over. He bit one of the vets, you know, and then one of the nurses got a couple of scratches from him. And usually he was very well behaved with him. Actually liked him there. We leave him there for, you know, the day sometimes and get his treatment done. But this time he was having none of it. He was just really, really upset. So those are a few about Mr. Wigglesworth. One time my parents came by and he ran to hide, and we looked for him. I thought maybe he escaped. Maybe he got outside or something. Maybe he took off. And he was afraid of the outdoors, you know. So we're looking for him. Where did I find this big cat? He was a big cat. You know, I find him behind our fridge. He's back there by the elements or coils or whatever they are, wedged in this little 6-inch spot between the fridge and the wall. We searched for him for it was about a half hour. We looked for this cat everywhere. And I'm like, this damn thing pulled the Houdini. No, he just was so scared when that door opened that he stuck himself behind the fridge. So, yeah, I don't know. That cat, man, he would just do some odd things, you know. And like I said, the one rabbit, Cuds, he was a real jerk. The cat did not like him at all. Pickles, our other rabbit, the brown rabbit, he loved that one. Now, speaking of rabbits, I might come back to Mr. Wigglesworth if I can remember some more. And I'm sorry that I'm just going on and on, but so whatever. I also had a rabbit when I was in Bible college. Got him in '97, Thumper. He was a little Holland lop, pretty white, you know, thing with little pink eyes and, you know, the lop ears. And I used to carry him around in my Dolphins jacket. You guys may have seen me in my Dolphins jacket. I've still got it. Got it in '95, and I still have it. I think Marino was still playing at that point, still quarterbacking. But so I used to carry this rabbit, and I'd put him in there, and I'd go places. You know, I'd go to the South Coast Plaza. I'd be like in Bulgari and Armani, you know, and I'd give him my best Brooklyn accent. You know, hey, you got any Hugo Boss jeans in here? I want some jeans. All you got are suits, you know. And so I'd go in there, and the salesman they'd already be pissed off at me because, I mean, I worked at the plaza there, but I'd go around and I just mess with them. They'd act all pretentious, and I'm like, And I was a 22-year-old, I was just being a jerk myself. But, I'd have this rabbit and, they'd start getting loud and this rabbit would pop his head out. And to me, it was just funny because they jump back. And I tell them, yo, just practicing for my next magic trick. And they'd be so livid and tell me to get out. So I'd have to find another store to go to next week. I even went to the Nordstrom rack at the Metro Point in Costa Mesa. It didn't matter. I just, I liked having fun and mess with people here and there. So those are some of the funny animal stories. There is one more. It's kind of messed up, involving my sister's dog, Rocky, and my grandma's dog, Mia, at the time. My grandma Helen was still around. My grandma Helen, I love her. Everybody hears me talk about her. She's like my mom, before she passed away. God bless her, back in 2010. But I used to mess with her so badly. What I would do is when I was at my parents' house, because my sister lived with them, I'd go upstairs and I'd get my laser pointer. And then what I would do is I would take the laser pointer from the landing. They had a loft upstairs. And I'd aim it at the carpet downstairs. The dogs couldn't see me, and I'd turn it on, and they'd go running after it, these two dogs. Both these little Boston Terriers. Excuse me, making myself cough here. So they go after the pointer, and what I do is I make a bigger and bigger circle. And these dogs would be doing laps. They do these laps around each other, and they're chasing after this thing. And it was hilarious. Now, what would happen is my poor grandma would see these dogs running around like crazy fools. And she'd go, hey, you guys, hey, you dogs, stop this. And she'd go in there, and I'd make the circle a little wider so they're doing laps around my poor 85-year-old grandma. She's like, what are you doing? She's turning around trying to get these dogs to stop, and I'm just having them do laps. And then I turn it off real quick before she'd see it. And then after a while of doing this, she caught on. She was pretty sharp. So she catches on and she sees the laser pointer on the ground because I just stop it there. And she reaches down to grab whatever this is on the ground. And after about 3 or 4 tries, she realizes, hey, it's nothing solid. It's a damn laser pointer. So I see her and I see the top of her head, and she points her finger at that thing, and she goes straight up, and she points her finger at me, and she sees me, and I'm laughing because I can't help it. And she whacks her finger at me as if to say, you're going to get smacked. And she's saying, boy, you better stop it or you're going to get it. Like, all right, Graham, I was just messing with the dogs. I had no idea. And she goes, I know you've been messing with me. And I would do it every time I went over there. She knew I loved her with all my heart, but it was hilarious. It was so funny, this stuff. So anyway, I think that's all I have to share right now as far as funny stories. We've got these other 2 little dogs right now that are pretty funny too. I'll probably share about them, but these are some funny animal stories that I was involved in. So hopefully nobody's offended by me kicking a possum or hitting a raccoon with a quarter or anything like that. But anyway, I just wanted to share with you guys. I thought it would be funny. I've had a good time. So I'm going to sign off real quick and go take my inhaler. I might be back on in a few minutes because I've also got funny grandma stories. I've got funny stories with my cousins. This is some funny stuff. Funny stories I tell my kids about growing up. I've been sharing more with them about family life and all the craziness. So, and I'll try to think of some more cat stories for Matt and Maria because Mr. Wilsworth was with us for 10 years. And he was hilarious. I mean, that cat was funny. I think he thought he was something else. But anyway, all right, guys, I'm going to sign off for a minute. Love you. Take care.